Sheriff Ozzie Knezovich talks with community leaders about issues in the public safety arena. Sponsored by River Ridge Hardware.
This is Ozzie Knezovich, Sheriff of Spokane County. This is the Sheriff's Report. And today we're going to talk about social media. More specifically, how that social media is being used to commit a lot of crimes in our community. A lot of our youth are committing crimes in our community using the social media of the day. And with me in the studio, I have Mark Voigtlander, our supervisor of our Regional Intelligence Group, better known as Rig 9. And Mark has been instrumental in making sure we have the capabilities to put together crime scenes, to put together linkages to be in between different groups, different suspects, and has solved a lot of crime in this area in the very short time he's been here. Mark is also helping us design the rig, taking it to the next level, so we will be able to step into the 21st century as far as real-time crime centers and being able to better protect you, your families, and this community, despite what sometimes our legislators do to our abilities to do that. Mark, social media. Social media is becoming a major player in a lot of the investigations that you're doing, a lot of the cases that you've worked on and solved. What exactly does that look like?
Well, the social media, Sheriff, what we look at particularly for an investigation, 9 out of 10 times any major crime, any sex crime, any drug crime has some element of social media with it, whether that be in the advertisement, whether that be in the conducting, whether that be in the being able to pinpoint what somebody did at a certain time to a certain location during the involvement or the carrying out of that criminal activity. It is, without a doubt, a major part of what we do. Maybe not the most important thing, but it is an element of every criminal investigation that we assist with.
You know, we've talked about this often, you and I, and we have talked about cases that are ongoing and have been in the past. And it's pretty interesting how social media plays that major role. And you took the time to develop a couple of slides to show folks exactly what's going on. So can we bring that slide program up? Let's go to the next one. So kind of give us an idea of what's going on here.
Well, and I'll give the caveat that the slides that are the ones that are here are based on my experience of what I've seen. Some of those happen to be what people advertise, but the bulk of what these are come from actual cases, things in Spokane, or activities. So this is what I see or what is happening here. Maybe not necessarily what's happening elsewhere, but this is community-based with a few points. This one slide is a bit different because this is the social media platforms that we see are being used by the juveniles in Spokane. On the left, that symbol is Snapchat, and the age indications of them, 13 plus, that's what age that they allow somebody to be on that platform. In most instances, if it's underneath the age of 18, it requires parental okay, which is easily forged. But Snapchat is 13 plus. TikTok, which is the next one over, is less than 13. There really isn't an age restriction. SoundCloud, which is the cloud, is a 13 plus, and that's how a lot of the music or gang ideation is being shared. Age 16 plus, you see that little airplane, that's Telegram, is a particularly insidious program that we can talk about a little bit later. And then you have Instagram, which I have the little icon of age 13, which is a wink wink. Those are as early there as 9, 10, or 11. There's really no check on that. That's a Facebook company. So generally what we see is anyone from the ages of 10 to early 20s, this is what they're using for communication. The top part talks about a Pew Research, right? The 18 to 20-year-olds say they use Instagram 71% of the time, Snapchat 65%. We see those numbers much higher in that under 18-year-old category, which isn't covered by the study, and that's what we see there.
Let's go to the next slide. So I like the way you framed this Snapchat. What is it? Because some parents, I really don't think they fully have a good grasp of Snapchat, what it really is, and its capability. So why don't you go through that one?
Sure. So Snapchat, and what this information is from advertisement, it's the forward-facing. This is who we are and what we stand for, right? And what Snapchat is a community where you can do anything. You can have interactions, you can buy and sell, you can play games, you can share where you are and what you're doing, photos, communicate with each other. It's a bazaar of activities available to that 13-year-old and older if you look at what the requirements are for the age. It is.
And you know, Mark, a lot of parents, when I do speaking engagements, they'll ask about social media. And my answer back to them is, really, I wouldn't allow my kids to have social media until they were 18. There was a reason for that, because I know what's going on.
Yeah.
I've seen social media used to traffic young people. A lot of the gangs are using that venue to traffic young people. And it's one of those things that if I had any advice to any parents, no, my 13-year-old would never be on this stuff. Absolutely zero would I allow that. Let's go to the next slide. And because here's why I wouldn't allow it.
Right, and what we saw before was the happy bubblegum explanation of what Snapchat is. In reality, what we've seen here locally are videos or explanations of juveniles in their bathrooms showing pictures of each other with guns, right? So that's one instance. We see that with gang activities. We see the second picture, which is kind of not necessarily a criminal activity, but certainly an immoral activity. With the smash and pass for this, as you often see the objectification of women or of teenage girls, whether they would be smashed or passed, which of course is a sexual reference, and that becomes fairly common. And there's there's Snapchat and Instagram pages that are designed to that for individual middle schools or high schools, and we see that and share that with the school resource deputies as well when we see those. What is interesting as well is the Snapchat profile underneath the heading Mail Delivery Marketplace is not only does it advertise what's happening here, but what can be shipped to you through the U.S. Postal Service. And with our investigative units, we have conducted activities which have shown that we can indeed purchase and acquire anything from vapes to marijuana to hard drugs to guns through the mail versus these applications. And then local delivery, you see the one on the right, that's a very common use where local dealers, and most of these are juveniles, will say, I'll come to you because you don't have the ability to drive. I'll meet you in this parking lot. I'll meet you, just drive your bicycle up and communicate with me and give me your $20-$30 and I'll give you the product that you want.
So this is all kids talking to kids for a great amount of that. There are older people that actually exploit this situation also. But guns, drugs, pretty much anything you want to find, you can find through these venues. And we've seen that at the local level. A lot of our gun deals are going down on Snapchat. Young people selling guns. Talk a little bit about what you've seen as far as that.
So I've seen that we have seen the purchase of guns through those applications. If I think back to, I'll say in the last year, 20 or 30 returns of search warrants, information we've got back from Snapchat. If I said that there were thousands of guns that I saw listed, that would probably be an exaggeration, but not by much. There's definitely over hundreds that are on these juvenile kids selling or looking at or passing And I know that we have multiple activities or illegal hits that have happened when these juveniles have tried to sell guns to each other, and instead of a purchase going down, they meet somewhere and they take or attempt to take by violence either the money or the guns. So we've got a handful of those that happen that I can articulate to as well.
A lot of rips going
Rips,
on.
yeah.
And the guns that they're selling are stolen guns.
They're stolen guns.
So it's interesting every time I hear about a new bill that our legislator are wanting to pass. There's a bill right now trying to limit the capacity of magazines. Until our legislators learn one thing, all that does is take the ability of law-abiding citizens to purchase those things. Law-abiding citizens are the vast majority that own guns. They're the vast majority that own high-capacity magazines. And to take that away does nothing to these people's ability to get those type of products. I mean, my gosh, we haven't fixed the problem of fentanyl coming over the borders. You don't stop the criminal from having this stuff. All you're doing is restricting law-abiding people, and this is a prime example. Most of what we're seeing as far as the gun deals are stolen firearms. Let's go to the next slide.
And to your point as well, Sheriff, a lot of the fentanyl is shared via this method to the underage individuals that are then dying from it. This is the major marketplace for that particular item in our area here.
It is, and sadly, about 3 weeks ago, I had a mother of a victim. Her son, pretty straightforward kid, going to GU, and thought he was getting Xanax, and what he was getting was fentanyl, and it killed him, and it was done on Snapchat.
Yeah.
So exactly what you said. This is a major drug dealing platform. Let's go back to that slide. So explain this one.
So this may be of interest to a lot of the local parents, right? I at times have been asked to go to church community groups to talk about social media and the impact and what it is for them or their children. And one of the concerns that they typically have is, it's just a way to keep with their friends, and it's just a local group. But what we find, in fact, is actually different, right? And particularly as it deals with the drug dealing. And these are actual snaps from around this area. The one on the left side, the map shows the location-based data of individuals that deal here in Spokane, and some of those are fentanyl pills, and they typically will have cartel-type connections. So, for instance, this is an individual. I'm not sure. I've been trying to find a prescription Xanax everywhere, and no one has pills. I've been looking, and then the other person who sent us this imagery was, hey, what about the dude that gave you some last time from Oregon? Has he not got any, right? So the individuals know that they're getting from out. They're smart enough to say we want it to be prescription, but in fact, when you look at the individual from Oregon, he was picking up in California and Nevada area, which that is one of the major thoroughfares to bring south of the border fentanyl that looks like prescription drugs into our area. So this is just example of what we see here with data we've collected here and how that exactly impacts us and really future deaths of fentanyl that we're going to see by this platform.
Let's go to the next slide. Put this one together for folks.
So we, last year, we gave you some data, and so you initiated the Sheriff's anti-violence effort. And part of that was we initiated some contacts via the Snapchat application and doing deals that had to do with juveniles and juvenile violence and the drug deal and drug prescriptions. Out of that, we've had quite an eye-opening experience of how this actually works together. This was one instance where one juvenile was dealing to other juveniles, making thousands of dollars a week, if not a day. And one of his partners was a suspect in a homicide out of northern Idaho. And another partner who was older had cartel connections that was helping to bring in not just the vape product, but also the marijuana cartridges and the harder drugs. In addition to that, we used Snapchat for multiple different drugs exchange, including guns, with these juvenile groups. Again, all of those illegal, all of those out of the area, but that's one of the examples that came that as our investigation, trying to understand what was starting and part of the juvenile violence problem.
You know, when we had that conversation, you know, a lot of people were like, well, why are these kids vape? Why the vape pens? What is the big attraction here? And why are they, you know, stealing and selling? And actually, they were ripping each other off.
Yeah.
You know, hey, we'll send you, sell you a bunch of vapes. They'd go to make the deal, and people were getting shot over vape pens. And folks, the reason that was is you can use those vapes to use your drugs, and that is a new delivery system. And you know, marijuana oil and all that are very, very potent. And again, what we've done to ourselves as a society sometimes makes me just scratch my head. Many of us tried to warn Washingtonians about legalizing marijuana. Now we're starting to see the true effects of that. You know, they told us, the people that promoted legalizing this, oh, the drug cartels will just go away. You know, it'll be legal. The underground marijuana will disappear. That's not what happened here. As a matter of fact, the cartels are stronger than ever, and the link to the Chinese syndicates are even more astounding, and it's all surrounds marijuana.
When we follow the money, right, the initial data would indicate that there was a problem. And as we followed the data with law enforcement activity and then evaluating what that activity meant, exactly what you said came out was that it was a furtherance of continuing criminal enterprises that weren't local, but we were part of the tentacle of something that was larger. And that's what the data indicates, and that's what our actions show. In addition to that, one thing we didn't realize when we looked at the data on the front end was that the power and influence of the money made from the vapes and the delivery systems, and how that fed into protection or being part of gangs to offer protection so you didn't get ripped. You had kind of this upward spiral of, I have money, so therefore I need protection. And then, hey, he has money, therefore I will steal it. And that created an increase in the violent efforts to protect and to get money from other folks. So you had this pride, and then you add some of the gang ideations of you hurt my brother, you hurt me, and it becomes even more problematic than just about the money or just about a sales mechanism for someone who states, if not a country away. And following the money is an incredible, difficult part with this, but we find that all of it doesn't necessarily reside here in Spokane. A lot of it goes elsewhere.
Yeah, it's amazing that our kids got sucked into the cartel, and they're being sucked into the cartel through these apps. Yeah. Let's go to the next slide. Why don't you talk about this one, because these are very disturbing things that happen in this community. We've had a lot of young kids die through gang activity and everything else. So talk about how the gangs are actually, challenging each other and basically telegraphing who's going to get hit next.
So Snapchat is kind of I guess to use a current reference, a one ring to rule them, right? It's a platform where TikTok videos will come in, where SoundCloud videos will come in, and they'll share those within this platform. So it becomes a go-to source for, hey, did you see this on Snapchat, even though it may have originated from a different application or a different method. So one thing that we see are the gangs will often make their own videos that have to do with gang-related. They'll have guns, and we'll also then see those as being threatening. And we see that kind of in the one on the left side there. The next one, too, of that was a conversation between two individuals. One was a vape seller, and the other one was a buddy of his, talking about how he beat people up, and that was just a normal course of the way you do business, right? And these are 14, 15-year-old kids that were talking about that when they happened. The one right next to them with the police officer, that's one that's kind of an interesting ideation. The more that we get into the Snapchat and understand what those icons mean, that doesn't mean that that's a police officer that's there. That means that it's someone doing something illegally. And this is a post from a 15-year-old kid saying, basically, I have guns to sell, right? And that's a local person here. And then we see that information of a video with that particular gun, if not other guns, weapon style ones that were acquired illegally. And what all of those have to do, and I had to black out a bunch of those, but because some of those are, within current activities, is that there's a lot of calling out. There's a lot of calling out of individuals. There's a lot of calling out about potential snitches, individuals that may have had a report somehow in law enforcement that may or may not have reported anything, but reported an activity that are then outed, and this is the platform that they do it with. The emojis on the left-hand side, we almost go back to some hieroglyphics here, where instead of words, and this is the part where parents might consider looking at their children's social media accounts a little bit better, but the top one there indicates different gang activities or being able to travel, an 8-ball, meaning some drug activity. The gas, an A and an NG, gang. Gas can also mean marijuana. You see the one right down there, a tree or a knife or a pound, to buy a pound, and then a bowl, to smoke a bowl, and then bombs and squirt guns, that they're selling guns. So not only is it the words, but the emojis mean things, and the people that are within the groups understand what those emojis mean. And that changes, so we try to understand. And off to the right there is a little one that we came from here locally, right? That wheelchair doesn't mean that the person is crippled. That means that the person's a crip. The blue color and that. And then the one right below him, the gorilla, that typically is a gangster disciple member, right? So, ninja money, he's a ninja at making money. A trademark means he's the original money maker, but he'll bite you if you try to take his money, right? So all of those are most of those are drug dealers and advertising if you were to look at their stories. But that's the forward-facing, what they're saying is, this is who I am, this is what I stand for. And what we see at times are some kids that just throw those emojis and act that way. And then they talk the talk, and then they get actions or beatdowns or threats against them. The bottom one isn't from here, and that was interesting. I thought I'd use that one. This was a threat in a video of a beatdown for a young kid that happened in the streets of an American city. And that video was posted, and we see that happening a lot here, but I didn't have any that I could share at this time.
We've seen one too many of those type of videos here locally.
Yep.
And the reaction of members of our community when we stepped up and went, we have a problem here. Yeah. It was amazing last March when Chief Meidel and I stepped out and went, we have a gang problem. At that time, we had 4 dead kids, all 4 of them African American. And some of the community on the more progressive socialist side said we were racist, were stepping up and trying to bring this conversation forward and trying to find a way to end it. And I will always find that just amazing. And when my question back to some of these people are, when do these kids' lives matter? When do they really, truly matter? Because I don't see your outrage. I don't see anything when I see these kids dying. And more importantly, when I see who's killing them are other kids of color.
Yeah.
And they're losing their lives right along with it. So it is really frustrating in our society that our values have become so skewed that instead of going, my goodness, kids dying is an outrage. No, it's become a racial hammer. And my point of it anymore is, fine, go ahead, call me a white supremacist, call me a racist. If that's what it takes for for you to maybe open your eyes, I'm fine with that. Because if me standing up trying to protect these kids' lives makes me that, I'll be that for you all day long. But we have to find a way to break through some of the insanity that we're seeing right now. You're at the front line of this. You're watching these kids die. At one point in a conversation last year, you made the statement that it's sad that we're almost to the point that we can predict who's going to die next, all based on what you're putting together here. Let's go to the next slide.
So this one is interesting. So I had to testify recently in a trial where I had identified or had some Snapchat data from a member of the school staff that was reportedly having a sexual relationship with a student, and there was some drug dealing going on as well. So with that, one of the things that we get back from Snapchat that's fairly effective is the ability to locate and analyze and determine where an individual is based on how they track the kids, which for us in law enforcement is fairly good. It's kind of a scary thought when you look at it and how it can be used in a little more insidious nature. So what I had done here is to look at how easy it is to track someone. So on the left-hand side, that's actually my hand. I'm at a gas station out in Cheney. This was last weekend, or a weekend ago, where I was there, and if you look close enough, you can see that my icon is right where the vehicle is, where I'm standing based on a map. So it is pinpoint accuracy that this is where I am. So I had a family member who was in Missoula, and she was sharing her data with me. So I looked at where she was located at that time in Missoula, Montana. So you can see the middle picture is where I am, where she is. And at that point, that spot where she is, right next to that park, was exactly where she was standing, right? So we have the ability then, or Snapchat has the ability to create an environment where if I want to meet you at a certain time, I can share my location with you, you can share it with me, we can establish a time and we can meet there. And what that data looks like on the right-hand side is a visualizer. So when we get that data back, it's basically a big spreadsheet that is hard to understand. So we have to put everything into a way that we can understand it. What that data shows is that we can then interpret is that these individuals were at this place at this time, and that solidifies what the case is. So that's the information that's being collected on you from those organizations, and that's how it's used to be able to connect with individuals.
And when you talk about the insidious nature of that, non-law enforcement can do this.
Yes.
They can actually track you and
Yep.
track you down.
Yeah.
If you're using these apps and things like that. You know, many of these apps that you can pick up, what's one of the first things that they always say, can I share your location? Absolutely never. I'm not, no, you can't share my location ever. And that's one of the things that, parents need to be very careful about what they're allowing their kids to do. There's no more parent controls from what I'm seeing with some of these devices. If you're going to give your kid a smartphone, what you're basically giving them is a ticket to the entire world and a dark web world if they get sucked into that. You need to make sure that every parent control app that you can find is on that to protect them from getting sucked into this arena. Let's go to the next slide. Our school threats. This happens more times than I really want to even think about anymore. It's at times daily that we're chasing this type of information down. Talk a little bit about that.
So what the top part was just a couple of weeks ago, I just said, okay, what information about school threats were out there in the last week? Nationwide, that's what we saw, those lists there. On the right-hand side was one from Snapchat that we could share. The one on the bottom was one that happened here locally that I think I shared about as much as I can of that, about an individual that basically said he was going to shoot and kill everyone. And that falls to our group to help with the resource deputies to find out who it is and conduct the investigations with that. We've seen an increase in the last year. I don't know how many thousands of hours that we as a sheriff's office have oriented against these threats this year alone in trying to determine if they're credible, to determine if what we need to do in order to keep the kids safe. So it is not just a potential problem, but it is a drain on resources that is huge to us in the law enforcement community.
It is, and the amount of things that we've been able to disrupt is dwarfed by the amount of stuff that,
Yep.
is just, no, that really didn't happen. It was 10 years ago from this community. It's being somehow rewashed, put back through
Yep.
the social media arm. So we trying to narrow down the truth from the false stuff ties up a lot of our resources. And people don't realize the amount of resources that we have that are put into just keeping their kids safe at school. And the amount of effort that is placed into that really, sadly, takes away from our ability to do other things to keep the community safe. But at the same time, there's no higher priority for us than if we receive one of these things to go find it, track it down, find out if it's real. If it is, stop it before it ever happens. And your group does it very, very well. And this community should be, should know about that. And quite frankly, as one of the community members myself, thank you for the work that you're doing to keep our kids safe. Let's go to the next slide. Let's talk about this one.
So this was one of the points I think that is interesting in our previous discussion was what do we see here? What's been my interaction with what's the law enforcement response back from Snapchat, right? When we go back to the earlier slide, right, and many of these companies will give us information on exigency. If there's something that we can articulate to them that someone's going to die or there's a threat of damage, they're very, depending on who it is, it's very, very narrow. We've been able to, I think one time in the last 6 or 7 times that I've tried to serve exigency on Snapchat, I was able to prove to their point that there was exigency, and all they gave me was information about who a person was, not what the location, not what we really needed to do to keep the individual safe. And so there's kind of an interesting challenge there to be able to have them actually help us to the level that we need to.
So they're really not all that helpful, even though they claim to be, and they claim to be concerned about kids and everything else. That's not what you're really finding.
That's not. I think one instance when I had a search warrant on an underage gun dealer here in the area who had just been shot in a gun deal gone wrong. I got his Snapchat back within a few hours, but most of that was when I looked at that was because there was a lot of child pornography on there. So then I had to write an additional point on that. So I think their internal mechanisms must have caught that there was that data on there, and when I asked for it, they gave that to me. But it didn't relate to what we were actually investigating at the time. It created a side investigation to it. But I look at a school threat. I issued a Snapchat request. They gave me a little bit on exigency. Served it, I think, on the 25th of last month to find some more data about where people were, what they were doing, what the actual communications were. And I got a notification yesterday that it came in. So when we get back, I'll look at what data they actually had to provide that. And so there's, generally speaking, it takes a long time to get the data. And as I showed you, my articulation of the map with all of those different points, that's the easy way to look at the data. More often than not, it's 5 or 6 spreadsheets that aren't tied to each other, that have pictures in one area that we have to put together and analyze in a way that makes sense. So no, it's not easy, A, to get the data, and B, understand what the data means when we get it. So it takes a little while to sort through that.
The harsh reality, I believe, is our kids' safety and quite frankly, futures are being destroyed by these apps. These apps are there simply to generate money. I mean, the people that own these apps, this is blood money. It truly is. And if I could ever meet them face to face, I would do my best to explain to them, you're making all this money based on kids dying from fentanyl, kids shooting each other. Is it really worth it? What is all this money that you have really worth these kids' lives? And to our elected officials at the state and national level, when are you really going to take these threats, and these apps are threats to our kids, seriously? When are you going to really help us regulate what these people are doing, or is their campaign donations more important than our kids' futures and their safety? It really comes always down to money. So much of what happens, the right gets sold out to money all the time. And I find that very frustrating. And sooner or later, it, at times it makes me chuckle because some of these folks claim to be, woke socialists. Well, under that concept, money's not supposed to be an issue here.
Not an issue.
But they sure seem to spend it very well. You see article after article anymore about Black Lives Matter and all the money that people have given them. It never got down to the local level. It never got down to the local level where we could really use that money to save these kids. It's been spent on mansions and everything else. Again, the folks that started that org were Marxist. But those Marxists sure turn into capitalists very quickly when money's on the line. And I just kind of shake my head at times about the hypocrisy that you see on a continual basis from these type of groups. Mark, I really appreciate the effort you put in to protecting this community. You worked all weekend again, and that's nothing new for you, simply to try to track down kids that are shooting kids and endangering the community. Folks, in the next week, I hope to have a video that I'm going to start releasing everywhere I go. I'm going to try to get this thing as far and wide as I can. What is the video? That video is of a shootout on the streets of Spokane between two carloads of kids at 5:40 in the afternoon on one of our busiest streets, Sprague. And what you're going to see, these are things that Baghdad, Mogadishu, Kabul, cities down in Mexico that are owned by our cartels, New York, Chicago, LA, not Spokane.
Yeah.
And we have worked very hard to keep this community safe, but on a continual basis, laws that are passed by our legislators always find a way to give the upper hand to the criminal. And they have made us very much unsafe. Reform laws, these weren't reform laws. These were get out of jail tickets for criminals. And what we're seeing now is this massive spike in crime. We're seeing our kids dying, and we're seeing our community. I've often said, and I hate to see it coming true, because I've always been asked by citizens, Mark, when does this end? I always said, it ends when the wrong person gets shot, when the wrong person gets strong-armed robbed, when a house invasion robbery happens to the wrong person. And you're seeing that in California now. You've had some very high-profile people be broke into home invasion type robberies, killed, and suddenly you're seeing laws going to be changed. You're starting to see emphasis on trying to knock this crime down. They don't care about regular mom and pop, but if somebody with money gets killed, that's when things start changing. Any one of us could have been on Sprague and Crestline that night. Any one of us, any one of our family members, any one of their family members. And maybe this is the one that will sink into some of our more woke social justice warriors in this area, that maybe what they've done to this community is not healthy. Again, thank you for all you do.
Sheriff.
Thank you for being on the front lines of this, and thank you for keeping this community safe. Folks, this is Sheriff Ozzie Knezovich. Just a few things to think about.